It began with promises, big ones. A stronger NHS. Fairer wages. A green revolution. Security for pensioners. Stability for families. After years of political turbulence, the British people placed their trust in a new government, Labour, standing tall on a mountain of manifesto pledges and economic confidence. But as the first reports rolled in, the cracks began to show. Behind the podium smiles and carefully crafted speeches, one brutal reality loomed larger each day: there isn't enough money. This week, the UK's official budget watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, sounded the alarm. The fiscal headroom available to Chancellor Rachel Reeves is just £10 billion. A buffer so thin, it could be wiped out by a single miscalculation or global tremor. And worse still, the promises already made may be financially unworkable. Welfare reversals have reopened multi-billion-pound spending holes. International panels have accused the government of pushing the poor deeper into poverty. Businesses are bracing for tax hikes or collapse. And looming over it all is a silent, creeping truth: Britain's public debt is soaring, and the future may be far less stable than voters were told. This isn't just a policy problem. It's a test of integrity, leadership, and survival. As pressure mounts and numbers no longer add up, the question becomes unavoidable. Has Labour already lost control of the nation's finances? As we peel back the layers of what's really happening behind the Treasury doors, stay with us. Because by the end of this video, you might just question whether the Britain we were promised was ever economically possible. And if this kind of honest, detailed breakdown matters to you, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. Now, let's get into the numbers and the nightmare unfolding beneath them. They called it the dawn of economic stability. Labour's first budget was meant to mark a turning point, proof that grown-ups were finally back in charge. Rachel Reeves, standing at the dispatch box with calm conviction, promised to restore fiscal responsibility after years of chaos and short-termism. But while the headlines praised her delivery, the numbers told a different story. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the UK's independent fiscal watchdog, Reeves is working with a mere £10 billion of headroom under her own fiscal rules. To put that in perspective, that's less than what the NHS burns through in just 3 weeks. It's a razor-thin margin, and one that could vanish overnight with a downturn, a public sector strike, or a jump in interest rates. The OBR's report didn't stop there. It warned that the UK's public finances are on an unsustainable trajectory. Debt is already at 94% of GDP, the highest in generations. And if the government keeps spending without real reform, that figure could balloon to a staggering 270% by 2070. Why? Because long-term costs are mounting. The aging population will stretch pensions and health care. The triple lock on state pensions, so politically sacred no party dares touch it, will eat up nearly 8% of GDP within decades. Add to that the multi-billion-pound commitments to green energy, infrastructure, asylum processing, and public sector pay deals, and suddenly, the sums stop adding up. The OBR didn't mince words. Labour's fiscal plans, as they currently stand, leave Britain exposed, without enough room for manoeuvre if, or when, the economy turns. And that's not just a risk. That's a warning. It wasn't meant to be this way. Labour's manifesto had promised discipline, clarity, and credibility. But within weeks of entering Downing Street, 2 major policy reversals sent shockwaves through Westminster and rattled the Treasury's already fragile calculations. The first, a U-turn on personal independence payment, PIP, reforms, scrapping a proposed reassessment scheme that was expected to save billions over the next decade. The second, the reintroduction of winter fuel payments for all pensioners, a move designed to appease older voters and maintain Labour's post-election goodwill. Politically, these decisions made sense. Social justice. Compassion. Protection for the vulnerable. But economically? They were devastating. Together, the reversals blew a £6.25 billion hole in Reeves's fiscal plans. The PIP reform alone would have saved around £5 billion, while universal fuel payments added £1.25 billion in annual cost. That single act of generosity nearly wiped out the entire £10 billion headroom Labour had left. It exposed the tension at the heart of the new government, the clash between ideology and arithmetic. Labour wanted to govern with empathy, but the numbers demanded ruthlessness. The Office for Budget Responsibility noted with barely disguised concern that these shifts weakened the government's fiscal position at a time of heightened risk. Translated, even small policy shifts could now destabilize the whole ship. What's more, they weren't one-off adjustments. They signaled a pattern, a government that might continue retreating under pressure from unions, media, or its own backbenchers. And in a fiscal climate as tight as this, each retreat costs dearly. The cracks weren't just showing, they were beginning to widen. When a government faces criticism at home, it can brush it off as politics. But when the United Nations steps in, accusing a G7 democracy of worsening poverty among its most vulnerable, the alarm bells ring louder. That's exactly what happened just days after Labour's first wave of welfare reversals. The UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities issued a formal notice to the UK government, expressing serious concern that its new welfare direction, particularly on PIP and universal credit, could push hundreds of thousands of disabled Britons into deeper poverty. They demanded an urgent response, with detailed explanations due by the 11th of August. The language was damning. The committee said the reforms risk undermining the dignity and independence of persons with disabilities and directly violate commitments the UK made under international human rights law. They were particularly critical of the lack of consultation, the speed of the changes, and what they called the regressive nature of the cuts. It was an extraordinary moment. A new British government, barely weeks old, being accused on the global stage of violating the basic rights of its own citizens. Labour defended the policy, insisting it would help target support more effectively and reduce fraud. But charities and disability advocates fired back. The respected Joseph Rowntree Foundation estimated that over 250,000 people would be worse off, while just 50,000 might benefit, a net increase in poverty, not a reduction. In the media, one phrase began to stick. The poverty lie. For a party elected on promises of fairness and justice, it was a brutal blow, and it came not from opposition benches, but from Geneva. For every political decision, there is an economic consequence. And in Labour's case, the numbers are beginning to speak louder than the promises. Across the country, businesses are growing nervous. Not just big corporations, but the backbone of the British economy, small and medium enterprises, the ones already struggling with inflation, staff shortages, and high borrowing costs. A new report, quietly published by the Federation of Small Businesses, warned that without targeted relief or tax incentives, over 50,000 firms could be at risk of closure within 18 months. The causes? Rising interest rates, wage pressures, and most worryingly, a lack of clear economic direction from the new government. Rachel Reeves' silence on corporation tax reform, business rates, and innovation funding has created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Investors are holding back. Startups are delaying launches. And across high streets from Devon to Dundee, shutters are closing. Then there's inflation. Despite optimistic forecasts, prices continue to squeeze the working class. And while the Bank of England has held rates steady for now, the OBR warned that even a 0.5% interest rate rise could cost the government an additional £7 billion in debt servicing. That's £7 billion wiped from public spending, not because of ideology, but because of arithmetic. Charities like the Trussell Trust have also stepped in. Their data suggests that cutting welfare now could cost the UK economy over £38 billion annually in lost productivity, healthcare strain, and long-term unemployment. In their words, poverty is not just a moral failure, it's an economic one. In this climate, Labour's vision of growth-led recovery is beginning to look fragile. And for a party that promised stability, fragility is the last word it can afford. Throughout the campaign, Labour repeated the promise like a mantra. No income tax rises for working people. It was clear, direct, reassuring. But in the weeks that followed, that promise began to blur. Rachel Reeves hinted at exploring wealth taxation. Then she refused to explicitly rule out new forms of stealth tax. Meanwhile, Treasury officials confirmed that fiscal drag, the quiet mechanism by which rising wages push earners into higher tax brackets without a rate change, would continue until at least 2028. It's a clever trick. Technically, no new taxes are introduced. But millions end up paying more. The Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates that because of frozen thresholds, an average household will pay £800 more per year by 2026, even if their pay rises just modestly. It's the stealthiest of tax rises, and it's already underway. Then there's capital gains, inheritance tax, dividends, all under review. Labour loyalists argue that these are fair targets, mechanisms that allow the wealthy to avoid paying their share. But businesses see it differently. In the private sector, murmurs of capital flight are growing louder. And among pensioners and landlords, many of whom aren't super rich but asset rich due to decades of inflation, the fear is palpable. Meanwhile, the British Chambers of Commerce issued a rare public warning. Uncertainty in tax policy is more dangerous than high tax itself. And that's the catch. Labour must raise funds. It must show credibility to the markets. But in doing so, it risks breaking the fragile trust it built with Britain's squeezed middle, families already grappling with rent hikes, grocery inflation, and stagnant wages. In the end, it may not be the billionaires who foot the bill. It may be you. It always starts with whispers. Then backbenchers speak out. Then the polls begin to fall. Less than 3 months into Labour's administration, the honeymoon is over. And a very British problem is setting in: disillusionment. According to a recent YouGov poll, government approval ratings have dropped to just 13%, with over 2/3 of voters expressing dissatisfaction with Labour's early performance. The message is clear: the public expected change, and instead, they're getting uncertainty. Inside the party, murmurs of frustration are growing. Some MPs privately complain that Reeves's obsession with fiscal credibility is strangling their ability to deliver on core Labour principles. Others worry that Starmer's team is drifting into technocratic fog, avoiding bold decisions, overcalculating every move, terrified of repeating past mistakes. But in the real world, beyond Parliament's red benches and policy roundtables, people are struggling. NHS waiting lists remain dangerously high. Rail services are disrupted. Strikes by junior doctors and civil servants continue. Local councils, already underfunded for years, face impossible choices as central support stalls. And every time Labour blinks, retreats, or fudges a promise, the public's confidence takes another hit. Media headlines once filled with optimism now read like warnings. Labour's discipline becomes paralysis. Promises unravelling, 1 week at a time. From mandate to muddle. For a government elected on the promise of stability, this is the most dangerous territory of all, not scandal, not ideology, but the slow erosion of belief. Trust, once lost, is hard to win back. And right now, the government is running out of both time and goodwill. Autumn is coming, and with it, the moment Labour can no longer delay. Behind closed doors at the Treasury, pressure is mounting. Markets want clarity. Voters want relief. And Labour? Labour needs a miracle. The next budget, due this autumn, isn't just another fiscal event. It's a reckoning. Chancellor Rachel Reeves faces an impossible balancing act. She must somehow square the books while keeping public services afloat, honouring key promises, and avoiding open revolt from both the left and right wings of her own party. So what are the options? Option 1, raise taxes. But Reeves has already boxed herself in. No income tax rises. No VAT hikes. Any increase now, especially through stealth mechanisms, could shatter Labour's image as the party of working families. Option 2, cut spending. But where? The NHS is already on life support. Schools are crumbling. Local councils have warned that further cuts could force them into effective bankruptcy. Option 3, stimulate growth. The classic political escape hatch. But the forecasts don't help. The Office for Budget Responsibility projects just 1% growth for the next year, hardly enough to plug the gaps or fund grand ambitions. There is a fourth option, but it's one no minister dares say aloud. Borrow more. Yet with debt already at historic highs, and interest payments eating into government cash like termites in wood, the risks are enormous. A misstep could spark another market panic, one eerily reminiscent of the Liz Truss disaster. So Reeves is stuck. Her room to maneuver is shrinking by the day. And with the whole country watching, one false move this autumn could collapse the fragile structure Labour has spent months building. There will be no hiding behind slogans. Only numbers. And consequences. This government came to power with a single, powerful promise. That it could deliver change without chaos. Ambition without recklessness. Hope with discipline. But after just months in office, Britain finds itself gripped by a slow, creeping doubt. The numbers don't lie. The watchdogs are warning. The global stage is watching. And behind every reversed policy, every strained promise, every awkward silence at the dispatch box, one reality grows clearer. The money simply isn't there. Now, the country faces hard choices. Do we raise taxes and risk choking recovery? Cut services and risk social unrest? Or continue borrowing, hoping growth will arrive before confidence collapses? Each path carries danger. And whichever Labour chooses this autumn, it will define not just its first year in power, but perhaps its entire legacy. Because this moment isn't just about spreadsheets. It's about trust. About whether the British people still believe that real change is possible through politics. We were told we could have it all: better healthcare, greener cities, fairer welfare, and economic responsibility. But maybe, just maybe, we couldn't. Or worse, maybe they always knew we couldn't. So now the question turns to you. Do you still believe in the promises? Was this just a rough start, or the beginning of something far more fragile? Let us know in the comments. If these deep dives help you make sense of the chaos, give us a like, and consider subscribing for more honest breakdowns of Britain's political crossroads. Until next time, stay sharp, stay questioning, and don't take their numbers at face value.